Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. It is a UFC Friday, your UFC betting preview. UFC Vegas 71 coming your way this weekend from UFC Apex Center in Las Vegas. Brendan Glasheen, your host, joined by our UFC contributors, Sean Zerillo and Billy Ward. We'll dive into underdogs, props, and more. We'll finish up with best bets as well. And who knows, maybe today will be another day in which we say the best bet is not our favorite bet, but we'll find out because that's what often happens. Point being is, folks, when these guys give out picks, they like all of them and they give out a best bet because they just have to make a choice. And sometimes they say it with more conviction than others. So just listen to the whole thing. Main event, Sergey Pavlovich, Curtis Blaydes. I'm tempted to make a dodgeball reference when White Goodman goes down the list of his fellow contributors on his team. Zerillo, going into this one here, Pavlovich has won 5 straight. Blaydes has won 3 in a row, 8 of 9. Two big fellas with power. How do you just first off assess the matchup? Both kind of vying for position here to move up the ranks, both 3 and 4 respectively. And how do you want to bet it?
Yeah, Billy and I were talking before the podcast that was Stipe and John Jones potentially fighting and then both retiring. This is a de facto number 1 contender fight for who is probably going to end up facing Cyril Gane for the heavyweight bout, which ends up becoming vacant after that Jones-Stipe fight. So very important fight here for the heavyweight division. Very intriguing fight from a stylistic perspective. I think Billy and I, and pretty much anybody who handicaps this sport seriously, would agree on how this fight plays out, which is very likely that if Curtis Blaydes can survive 7 minutes, he should look about minus 1,000 over the remainder of the fight, whether he finishes the fight in the second round or is able to coast to a decision with his grappling. He's probably the best wrestler in the heavyweight division. Maybe Jelton Almeida has something to say about that. Almeida is the better grappler than Curtis Blaydes. And Blaydes isn't a particularly adept or damaging offensive grappler. He's good at taking people down, holding position, doesn't necessarily land a ton of damage, doesn't really have much of a submission game. But Pavlovich is a bad defensive grappler. We saw him get completely dominated by, I believe it was Alistair Overeem. Incredibly powerful on the feet. Blaydes is a little chinny, and Pavlovich is the better technical striker and has the speed advantage. So we've seen Blaydes in other fights be content to strike in round 1, falls in love with his hands a little bit. He needs to wrestle here immediately because he's a little chinny. If Pavlovich connects, it could be lights out very quickly. We've seen him connect on other heavyweights, and his power just seems to be a little bit different and above average, even for the heavyweight division. So the way I would want to bet this is Pavlovich early, Blaydes late. I think from a pre-fight perspective, the best ways to bet it, Pavlovich round 1, Pavlovich round 2, and then look to live bet Blaydes after round 1. If you have a book, there's one book out there that lets you play same game parlays. I would look to place Pavlovich and under half a round at plus 600, Pavlovich and under 1.5 rounds at plus 250, and then alternatively, Blaydes with the over 1.5 rounds is plus 250. Blaydes with over half a round is minus 105. So amongst those 4, I'm probably going to look to play Blaydes with the over half a round and live bet Blaydes after round 1. But I'm very tempted to play the other way and bet Pavlovich early in the first round, in the first round and a half. I think if you give him that time, that minute or two to stand up in the second round and potentially ran a knockout too, he may have an opportunity to do so. But I expect Blaydes, not only with his style, but just in terms of the cardio advantage, to be able to tire out Pavlovich if this extends for any period of time. So Blaydes justified favorite, but that first round is going to be very hairy.
Billy, coming in to UFC Vegas 71, Zerillo kind of mapped out there. Pavlovich has had some early minute finishes as of late, and you've got your luck ratings up right now at actionnetwork.com. You think the line's fair with Pavlovich at plus 138, Blaydes minus 170. How do you want to go about betting a side here?
Yeah, this is, and I put it, in the luck ratings. If this weren't the main event, I would not mention it at all in luck ratings because all of Pavlovich's fights have ended in the first round. There's nothing lucky about a first round knockout one way or the other. This is also like my least favorite kind of fight to handicap, which we've talked about lately. You've got a guy who's just on an absolute tear against lower level competition, fighting kind of a stalwart of the division. He's got some losses, but they're against the best of the best. It's just tricky. because, we haven't seen Pavlovich beat upper level competition. Doesn't mean he can't. He's beat everyone they put in front of him since his debut against Overeem. Totally agree with Sean on all of his points. It's, as he put it, pretty much the only way you can see this fight. If I had to go one way or the other, I like the Pavlovich early lines. Superficially from a skill standpoint, he's kind of similar to Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou, pretty one-dimensional strikers who both have wins over Curtis Blaydes. Pavlovich also does have a wrestling background himself. I believe he competed in Greco-Roman, which isn't great for MMA. Like, it's probably the worst kind of wrestling background to have for MMA, but it's better than no wrestling background. And yeah, he got worked on the ground by Overeem, but I'm pretty sure Pavlovich was expecting a striking fight. If he has any sense at all, he's expecting Blaydes to try to wrestle here, which changes the calculus a little bit. But perfect world, Pavlovich either finishes him round one or hurts him enough that we can get a huge line on Blaydes live after round one. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. FanDuel, I love the multiple rounds where you get the equity in all of them. Pavlovich rounds 1, 2, or 3 plus 185. Not a ton better than his money line, but the odds of him winning any other way are infinitesimal. So I've got no problem with that. And then again, Blaydes live. I'm not going to take Blaydes live if he wins round one and goes to minus 500 or something. But if Pavlovich lands a couple times and we can get a better odds on Blaydes, certainly like that. And Sean's totally right. If you can get Blaydes in over 1.5 or Blaydes late style props, that makes a ton of sense too. My only concern with that is Blaydes taking him down right away and finishing him wouldn't totally shock me. I think that's more likely than Pavlovich grinding out a 5-round decision. So that's why I like the Blaydes live once we know that risk is removed. Obviously, you're taking the chance of, the line not getting better, but sometimes the best bet is the one you don't make. So I'm willing to hold my money until then.
Yeah, that's why, of the 4 bets that I mentioned, I like the Blaydes with the over half around, because if Blaydes does get that, Pavlovich is very reckless, going to come right at Blaydes. If Blaydes shoots that reactive takedown, gets it, I still think it probably takes him a couple of minutes to finish the fight. He's going to be careful consolidating in that position, not like a, crazy black belt where he's immediately going to wrap up an arm triangle or something. I think it's still going to take him 2 minutes to finish that fight, even if he lands a takedown in the first 30 seconds. So Blaydes with the over half around at minus 105, I think covers the most amount of outcomes in this fight. But if you want to play Pavlovich early into a Blaydes live bet, I think that's a very fine way to play it as well.
Okay, there's your main event preview, Pavlovich Blaydes. Onto our favorite underdog that we might like for the weekend. We'll go to Zerillo first. What do you got?
Yeah, Priscilla Cachoeira, not so dissimilar of a fighter from Sergey Pavlovich. Honestly, very reckless, going to come forward and chuck hands. And typically in the lower weight classes, and the women's divisions happen to cover all of the lower weight classes, being 115 to 145, we see fewer finishes. And physicality and aggression tends to matter more. And Priscilla Cachoeira encompasses that more than almost any other fighter in the women's division. She presses forward constantly. She throws very hard. She puts a lot of damage on her opponents. She's fighting Karine Silva, who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, has a severe grappling advantage. Similar to Pavlovich, Cachoeira is not a good defensive grappler and can get put on her back and submitted. But she's willing to cheat if she gets put on her back. She eye gouged Jillian Robertson. She's dirty, but that's kind of what you want in a fighter you're going to back. They will do whatever it takes to win. And frankly, I don't think fighters foul enough or cheat enough at the UFC level. It always takes like one warning and then one stern warning before they're even given a point deduction after cheating. So if I was an MMA fighter at the professional level, I would definitely be trying to implement cheating tactics and trying to gain an edge wherever possible. And I think Priscilla Cachoeira definitely does that. But in a fight that extends, I think she's the better minute winner on the damage. She's very likely to get taken down and submitted immediately. But in any fight that extends, I think it does favor her actually, not only in volume cardio, but just on pure damage optics. So Cachoeira on the money line, Cachoeira live after round one, because her opponent, Karine Silva, the one time she's been extended past a round and a half, she lost. So we see a lot of these fighters with early finishes come up, move up in competition to that UFC level, finally get a little resistance from a fighter who knows what they're doing and get extended and lose fights. So Cachoeira on the money line pre-fight, probably, or I would say definitely is more finishing upside on feet and comparable to what Silva has on the mat, but also live after round one, I think is a solid angle to play Cachoeira as well.
Okay, from Karine Silva to Bruno Silva. and that is Billy's pick for his underdog. And he's got a write-up, as I mentioned. He's got the luck ratings up right now. And despite a setback last time out, Silva, Billy, has burst onto the scene here, and that's why you still like him.
Yeah, before we jump into that one, just wanted to say, fully with Sean, I have a Cachoeira bet later. And yeah, you should always cheat in MMA. You basically get to do one of each type of foul before you face anything. So groin strike doesn't really matter in the female fight. Cage grab, eye poke. You can do each of them one time before anything bad happens. So, when we're handicapping, maybe we do take the people willing to cheat a little bit because nothing really bad happens, But anyway, on to the Bruno.
It's a bit of a different tone on this pod because when Zerillo, talks about baseball, he highlights guys that used to use sticky stuff, and in Max Scherzer's case, he still does. Or if you're listening to our NBA podcast, Buckets, beware of guys wanting to drop knees on people because then they might not play the next game. So this is actually a case where we can use it to our advantage. So
you can probably even get away with one knee on the ground unless it's too hard in an MMA fight without too many major consequences. But anyway, back to Bruno Silva. Yeah, it's simple. He won 3 straight fights in the UFC by first round knockout, lower level of competition. Fights Alex Pereira in what was clearly a showcase fight for Pereira, takes him to a decision, mixes in his wrestling. He's a BJJ black belt. I'm not sure about Silva's wrestling because taking down Alex Pereira isn't a huge accomplishment, but he's fighting a guy in Brad Tavares who's pretty one-dimensional striker and has almost no power. His knockdown rate is lower than the entire UFC's average, not the divisional average, the average that includes 115-pound female fighters, less knockdowns than them on average. So that's not a great style when you're going against a guy who has big power and potentially a grappling edge. Of course, it all comes down to his last fight, Silva's that is, against Gerald Meerschaert, where he looked terrible. He was winging wide punches, gassed out early, got finished. At plus money, I'm just willing to overlook that one, right? Everyone has a bad day. It's not like we have, full baseball or NBA season where we have, a big sample size here. Guy might have been sick, might have been hurt, might have been beat up after the Pereira fight. It was kind of a quick turnaround. Any of that could have happened. The other angle I'm playing in this one, and keep an eye on Prop Squad later, I actually like this fight to end in split or majority decision at plus 600. Tavares is probably going to land more strikes than Bruno Silva. Silva is going to land the harder strikes and also has some grappling edge. That's hard to judge. I'd feel even better about this line if we were in Missouri or Texas or somewhere with horrible judging. But that one's plus 600. I really like that just because, it's kind of down to the individual judges whether 3 light strikes equals 1 heavy strike or something to that effect, which is how I see the likeliest outcome here. But in terms of a money line play, Silva has all the finishing upside, both on the ground and standing. So at plus money, I'll take that.
On to the fight of the night, Jeremiah Wells, Matthew Semelsberger, 2 welterweight hitters getting set to square off this coming weekend. Taking a look at the lines at FanDuel, Wells minus 112, Semelsberger minus 108. A little momentum coming in here for Wells. He's gone 3 for 4 so far in UFC. Zerillo, how do you assess this fight, and why does it jump out to you as one you'd like to bet, and how will you bet it?
Yeah, I think because Jeremiah Wells is just so explosive and Matt Semelsberger seems pretty durable, the idea that Wells should have early success here because he does against almost every opponent. He's so incredibly explosive and athletic in the first round. The idea that he could knock Semelsberger out or take him down and submit him, I think is pretty exciting because I would think that most fans view Semelsberger, former football player, guy who could take a lot of power on a punch, as very durable and very tough to get out of there. But Wells is very capable of doing it. Comes from a Philly gym that we've seen have a ton of success in the UFC, Renzo Gracie. But we have seen Wells struggle when he gets extended. So I think there is a possibility here as well that Semelsberger loses round 1, potentially even gets dominated, 10-8'd, knocked down, dominated on the ground, controlled for an extended period of time, does nothing offensively, but then rallies in the second and third round. So I like Matthew Semelsberger here live after round 1, would consider him as a pre-fight money line bet, but he's so likely to lose that first round to Wells. I'm not as interested in playing it. I think the live angle is the better play. Maybe also a same game parlay with Semelsberger and over 1.5 or Semelsberger's late props round 2, round 3. But live after round one, I think the best way to play him. I view him as the better volume striker, probably the better technical striker. He hits hard too. Wells is just, I mean, an absolute tank. He seems to touch people and they go to sleep. When he wraps them up, he's able to pull them down to the ground rather easily. He's a phenomenal grappler. He hits very hard. I just think over the course of a 15-minute fight, there's a reason why this is lined as a pick'em. Wells should be a bigger favorite after round one. I think you jump in on Semelsberger around plus 200 or higher. So Semelsberger after round one, how I'd play this fight, but I expect a good one. And I think Wells has a high chance of finishing in round one. If you're playing DFS, I would definitely be using both of them.
All right. Wells coming in on a short win streak, Billy, and just reading from your luck ratings right up, you were a tad surprised that this was a tight line.
I am. And, I hear all of Sean's analysis and he makes some good points. I usually come with a little bit more in-depth support for my positions in this one. But man, Wells is just so much better than Matthew Semelsberger. Like, Semelsberger's a good athlete. He played, somewhat high-level college football, tough, whatever. But skill for skill, Wells is better everywhere. I think he's the better striker. We can argue power. I don't, that I'm not too worried about that. But Wells is just a phenomenal grappler. The Renzo Gracie Philly guys always just continue to maul people on the ground. Wells is 3-0 in the UFC, all finishes. But if you look back prior to his UFC career, he has some, 5-round decisions for regional championships and fairly high-level fights. He fought some future UFC guys before he even got to the UFC. I'm really high on the Renzo Gracie Philly guys generally, but Wells is my favorite of the bunch. I've also watched a ton of tape on him. I've been booked to fight him at a couple different points in our respective regional careers. So followed him really closely. I like Matthew Semelsberger. He's a fun fight guy. But Wells is another one. Just because we haven't seen him go long into fights doesn't mean he can't. And if you look back a little bit into his regional career, we actually have seen him do that and hold up pretty well. So I'm not as worried about his cardio. I think he'll have enough of an advantage. And if this one hits the ground at all, he's many, many levels ahead of Matthew Semelsberger.
That's terrifying that you were scheduled to fight Jeremiah Wells. I would guess he's like twice your size. That's what I would have assumed.
I got a few inches on him. We both fought 170. He would have slaughtered me, but we had an amateur opponent in common who I beat and he did not. It was like his first fight ever. So I was kind of using that to try to talk up, get some big money from one of the bigger regional promotions. Everyone involved knows how that one would have gone. So
yeah, you probably saved yourself a bad knockout, but I
did.
mean, hey, it almost happened.
I'm pretty glad it didn't happen, but point being, I've watched literally every one of his fights over and over, so I do have some inside info on that one.
Billy, how tall are you?
About 6 foot.
Okay, he's only 5'9".
Yeah, but he's built like a truck.
Yeah, he's a tank. Yeah.
Well, what would that make you built like if you had to give yourself a comp?
When I was fighting 170, a stick.
All right. I would have taken Wells.
Yeah, no, as you should have. You would have been minus 10,000.
Okay. Good insight. We rarely dive into Billy's fighting career on the pod, so it's good to turn back the clock. Okay, we've got props and then the best bet before we leave. Let's go to props. Zerillo, what do you have for us?
First fight of the card, which I'm typically terrible at betting, but this is a higher level fight than what we typically see from the first fight on the card. We usually don't have any data for the first fighters on the UFC card. They're glorified contender series fights, but Dana Bakary, however you want to organize his name, against Brady Highstand, who was in the Ultimate Fighter finale. Dana has decent wrestling, and I think enough wrestling to resist Highstand early and put him in serious danger on the feet. Better technical striker, much more power, hits very hard, and I do not like the way that Highstand has reacted to strikes in the past. He seems like a durable kid, but he's very, very hittable, and he's going to get clipped hard and often here, I think, particularly in the first round. So Dana inside the distance by knockout, maybe even his round one props as well. I'm going to consider playing all of those. This seems like a big step up in competition for Highstand. He's improving, shoots takedowns at a high clip, would not touch Dana's money line because I think over the course of 15 minutes, there's a chance that Highstand, especially if he's improved, could absolutely destroy him with wrestling. But if he's not able to get those takedowns, I think he gets finished. So Bakary Dana inside the distance, knockout, maybe his round one prop as well.
Billy, as you mentioned, you're going to go back to Zerillo's underdog pick, but you have an angle in the prop market.
Yeah, Priscilla Cachoeira, zombie girl as we call her. I'm just taking her round one line. It's as high as plus 600. The thesis here is Karine Silva hasn't fought anyone who's going to come forward as aggressively and blitz her the way Cachoeira is, because there really isn't any, or not many, female fighters who just go with that kind of reckless abandon and have the power to match it. We've seen some, I talked about, who was it a few weeks ago, who does a similar thing but doesn't really have the power. Luana Pinheiro, similar style but minus the power. Cachoeira has both. And we're going to know right away if Karine Silva can hold up to that or not. She survives a blitz. She's probably going to work her. She's the far better grappler, maybe even better technical striker. But, I just don't see Cachoeira winning 15 minutes here. There's a chance, start of the second round, start of the third round, that she gets another blitz in before she gets taken down, and maybe one of those sticks. But plus 600 is just too good in the first round. Silva probably wins this one, more technical fighter, but it'll be a scary 45 seconds or so if you're on the Silva side. So I like that plus 600 for Cachoeira.
Okay, and before we go, best bets for UFC Vegas 71. Cirillo, I've been building up to this now. Is this best bet your best bet?
It's not. I didn't even have a best bet in the document until about 2 minutes before the show. Yeah, just with the way we format the show. In addition to the fact that there's hardly anything on this card that I want to bet. Maybe Cachoeira is my best bet. But I think this is a good card for live betting. Actually, it's a very, very good card for live betting. We already talked about the few of the angles. Sergey, or the Blaydes over Pavlovich, I think is a fine live bet. Semelsberger over Wells. I'm not sure if Billy would agree with that. Montel Jackson against Ronnie Yaya. And there is also, Cachoeira over Silva, I think, could be a good live betting spot as well, just because Silva, when she gets extended, has struggled. But my favorite of the live betting spots is Ricky Glenn going against Christos Giagos. Both Giagos brothers have about 6 or 7 minutes of cardio, and then they completely fall off a cliff. Christos has been finished in 7 of his 10 losses. Typically either needs to get a takedown in 2 of the 3 rounds and hold you there, or finish the fight early. Ricky Glenn is exactly the type of fighter who is built to withstand early damage or early trouble and then rally to beat you. So Ricky Glenn live after round 1, my favorite live betting spot on the card, probably the best overall betting spot on the card when you think about where the odds might move if he's taken down and controlled for 5 minutes. Probably going to flip from a favorite to an underdog, and then he's going to look like a favorite over the final 2 rounds. But I also like Glenn to win in round 2 at plus 850 and Glenn to win in round 3 at, I believe, plus 1400. Any of the numbers in that range are fine. Plus 750 in round 2, plus 1,000 in round 3, I think I would take. Just given the cardio dynamics of the fight, given the cardio dynamics of both Giagos brothers, the fact that they've never improved their cardio base either, I think this fight is a high chance of being finished in round 2 or round 3 by Ricky Glenn. So Glenn live after round 1 in his late props. My favorite live betting angle on this card, not necessarily my favorite bet, but something I actually do like quite a bit.
Okay, good stuff. Billy, you've got a money line play, and then we're out of here.
Yeah, absolutely not my best bet either. Might have been on Monday or so when she was still at plus money, but now it's moved to be about a pick 'em. Still like the bet, just not, that high degree of confidence. And that's Norma Dumont fighting Carol Hosa. This is a featherweight fight where Dumont has fought the bulk of her career. Hosa has been a bantamweight for a while, stepping up. This might be better for her. It might give her a little more gas tank with less of a weight cut, or she's just going to be too small and get bullied a little bit. They have very similar records too, so it's not like she's had a ton more success in this stepping up. Also, Dumont's only loss in her last 5 was a split decision against Macy Chiasson. Probably butchered that one, but so we've seen her have one fighter have success in this division, another one hasn't, and it's about a pick 'em. So still like that, wish that line would have stayed plus money on the Dumont side, but I think she should be a slightly heavier favorite just based on the way that she's lost fights and the weight class optics here.
I feel like I need to comment just because I'm a huge Carol Hosa fan, which I feel like there's not many Carol Hosa fans out there.
Might be the one.
I know. So cardio never an issue for her. Fights at really high volume. Going up in weight isn't necessarily going to help her game. She already throws a ton of strikes and has great cardio over 15 minutes. The size differential, not super concerned about. They have the same reach. Dumont's 2 inches taller. She does hit harder though, Dumont, and also has all of the grappling upside in a pick'em fight. really, it just comes down to Dumont's enthusiasm. Does she want to wrestle? Does she want to put Hosa on her back? Because if she wants to, she can. And she could probably hold Hosa there. But if she decides to stand up and strike for 15 minutes, which Dumont has been known to do in the past, I think Hosa can pace her and win on volume over the course of 15 minutes. So this all comes down to Dumont's willingness to grapple, which she always, or doesn't typically do in every one of her fights. But if she fights smart, she should win this.
And that grappling is also where, in my opinion, at least, the weight advantage matters a lot more. You can knock out someone bigger than you, but getting out from under someone bigger than you, even if it's only 5 or 10 pounds, it's a 10-pound jump in weight class. But we got to remember, I always try to think of that percentage wise. Going up from 185 to 205 proportionately isn't that much difference than, the 10 pounds for smaller people, just in terms of percentage of body weight. So as Sean pointed out, might not matter if she doesn't grapple. Probably matters a ton if she does grapple. So we'll see. But at a pick'em price, I'm okay with it. Would have loved to have the plus money, but here we are.
Okay, there you go. UFC Vegas 71, your betting preview. Real quick, 10 seconds. Billy, any update on the internet court?
It was great. The guy came out Friday night. The dogs have managed to stay away from it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're doing good. Hence, coming at you live with video this week.
Good to see your face. I mean, I do miss the professional talk radio feel to what you brought to the table last week. So maybe you can fake an internet break or an internet cable break soon. We can get that awesome sports talk radio kind of call-in voice from you, because you sounded really legit. Anywho, okay, that's it. Sean Zerillo, Billy Ward, find them both in the Action Network app. If they have any late ads, as Zerillo highlighted, live betting is a possibility, something to consider for this weekend's card. So be on the lookout if you would want to get more analysis and picks there in the free award-winning Action Network app. Couple of housekeeping notes before we go. You want to check out Billy Ward we talked about his luck ratings quite a bit on this show, of course, for UFC. Baseball from Billy Ward. No run first inning, yes run first inning write-ups over on the Action Network website, Action Network app. Billy's been putting those out on a regular basis for the baseball season. Sean Zerillo, opening pitch. You can find his write-ups there almost every day. Not every day, but for most baseball betting cards this season, Zerillo will have opening pitch, extensive breakdown, picks as well for baseball slates. Also, next week, NFL Draft gets underway starting Thursday. We'll have our final mock draft episode. Luke Swain, a.k.a. Vegas Refund. He'll be joined by the Fantasy Law Guy and myself. We're coming up with the pod Tuesday morning. Draft is Thursday, Tuesday morning, mock draft episode. Plus, we'll have one last betting update episode next Wednesday prior to Thursday's first round. So be on the lookout for NFL Draft 2023 coverage from Action Network next week here on the pod. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great weekend. Enjoy. Happy betting. And thanks for listening to the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel.